Hey everyone, this is Dan. This is Sandeep. Sandeep is a client who used DataInterview.com, the courses as a way to prepare for data science interviews at Bang. And congratulations, Sandeep. He recently landed a role as Apple's data scientist. So quick little interesting background information about Sandeep. He just completed his Ph.D. in decision science. And he used to be a data scientist at Google prior to pursuing his PhD. So he's actually has some number of interesting experience in the data science field, along with a PhD. So in this data talk today, we're going to talk about a number of things from his background experience to interview experience, any sort of general tips that are going to be helpful for candidates who are trying to break into data science. So without further ado, Sandeep, I'd like to kind of give you maybe a few minutes, just kind of give an intro about yourself.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dan. It's really amazing that we are doing this because I've seen so many of these interviews on your channel. Like mock interviews and people talking about their experience. So it's surreal to be here and share my experience. So for everyone out there, I think like they will get to the end of their journey and probably they'll get a chance to speak to you like this again. But yeah, so like you mentioned, so I'm almost finishing my PhD in information and data sciences at the University of Minnesota. So my research is in the area of experimentation, like A/B testing, which is becoming like really popular these days in companies, as well as I feel like most companies are now testing candidates on like A/B testing questions as well. Yeah, so before this, I was actually an automation specialist at Google anti-abuse team in Google search. So my job there was to use data analytics to remove bad websites from showing up in Google search results. And so the reason why I switched to PhD is so I wasn't classically trained in all things data science. So I learned most of my stuff on the job, like more SQL, like Python, and like how to use infrastructure, like how to use data in order to solve problems, machine learning. But after a point of time, I felt like I was hitting the skill ceiling. There is only so much I can learn on the job. So I decided to come to US for grad studies. And so the department I'm in right now is like decision sciences, like you mentioned. So people here do all things causal inference. So most focus is on econometrics, about attributing like a cause to effect. Like for example, so one of the very interesting papers that came out of our department is like how does Craigslist coming into a city impact the amount of HIV incidents in that city? Like completely different topics. It's so hard to answer it. Like
Yeah,
how can you attribute an effect of an online website to something such like as offline phenomenon as like a health care issue?
yeah.
So like causal inference and like techniques in econometrics like really help you get to answer because you can't experiment everything.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. I think that's a very interesting thing. For those who are not familiar with inference, so this is like a sort of like a case where you cannot necessarily run an A/B experiment, largely because there could be like sort of like a spillover effect where you can't really isolate the effect to control a treatment. So it could be like maybe in the form of, in the healthcare space, for instance. So, maybe the rollout of masks, to nationwide, like how effective is that in
Yeah,
preventing COVID infection, right? Like you can't necessarily just isolate that to like one region and the other region, like it's sort of like, nationwide, right?
yeah,
To another application, potential application could be like if it's like an online experimentation and maybe there's a major revamp on a website, rebranding, redesign, the whole thing, right? You can't necessarily isolate whether certain group of people will be exposed to the whole changing of the logo or not, right? Like whether
exactly.
everyone sees it or not. So this is more like, okay, let's let everyone see it and let's not, and see what the impact is. And there's a
Exactly.
number of like all these different techniques as a way to kind of measure whether this effect that we observe is
Yeah.
because of the change that was applied to everyone.
Yeah. I mean, definitely, I feel like more and more companies are now slowly getting into using causal inference.
Yeah.
I mean, experimentation is getting adopted very widely, but at the same time, I feel like people understand that, experimentation is not the answer for everything. And they're slowly getting into using causal inference method as their core data stack. So, which is something I feel will become even more popular in the years to come.
Yeah, definitely. So I would love to kind of dig a little bit deeper about your background because I think it's really interesting. So when you were, I'd like to kind of actually follow some chronological order here.
Yeah,
So I
sure.
think people will be very interested in what you did at Google actually. So you were part of the anti-abuse team within Google. And so could you talk a little bit more about that experience? Like what kind of project did you like work on? Any sort of interesting thing that people might be interested in, especially if they want to work at Google?
Yeah, for sure. So, like I mentioned, so it's anti-abuse team now rebranded as Trust and Safety at Google. So I was in Google search team. So the main idea is that like people use like lots of like SEO in order to promote their websites on Google search. I know it's a very very big industry of search engine optimization, but
Yeah,
at the same time they can try to hack the Google search guidelines and create all sorts of spam, like using keyword stuffing or using like, uh, very bad sort of linking or, buying expired domains and trying to use that, the previous links to that website in order to promote their new website. So, which is all bad for experience for like a Google search user. So our job was to kind of like find these patterns that people are using in order to circumvent our search guidelines and remove them from the search results or demote them or like penalize them in some way that we deem like is the best way to take action on them. So some of the like projects that I can like an example project would be like a lot of the viewers would be familiar with something like a streaming spam. Like if you search for the latest game, like stream online, you will see so many of these bad websites that turn up. You know,
yeah,
so they will ask you to like fill a survey, or they will redirect you to some like a spammy website, which collects information, or hack you or phish you. So things like that.
yeah,
So our job there was like how can we remove these websites at scale? What
yeah,
on-page signals or what website information we can use in order to remove them before they even show up in search results.
yeah. Yeah, that's really cool. In fact, I want to just briefly just kind of perhaps take a little bit more deep dive on that because, for candidates who are preparing for whether it is that trust and safety role at Google or, meta interview, they love to ask questions about that sort of abuse on platform, right? And so, I always get a number of people sort of asking me, how would you answer questions like, how do you prevent spam on Meta or something like that, right? Um, and I think it really boils down to, first of all, understanding the behaviors of, what is a typical, like a spammer sort of like behavior, right?
Exactly.
And I've also been in that space, building these anti-abuse sort of space for PayPal. And so generally for me, the technique that I would use is like a sort of like, it is sort of like, it makes sense for like a spammer to create as many accounts as they can
Yeah.
off of maybe like a single IP address, and it would just keep coming back and generate as many posts as they want, right? Is that sort of like a similar kind of perhaps like a technique, one of the many techniques that you might have also used yourself?
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of similar. For example, websites have like website registration. Like email addresses that are they are registered to or addresses they are registered to. So if one website of a spammer is spam, so there is a very high likelihood that their other websites are spam as well.
Yeah,
So we use signals like that, or we can also use user-related signals, as in how quickly they are bouncing back to the search result page. Because users are really good at detecting if a website is spam or not. They
yeah,
look at it and they're like, there is no way this is leading me to like a legit streaming site. They would immediately go back.
yeah,
So yeah, so you can use like all these multiple signals, and actually, like you said, in PayPal, like they have the similar IP address where they are doing their abuse from. So
yeah,
it is with the similar flavor, like it's all products are abused with somewhat shared flavor.
yeah. Yeah, in fact, I think you just mentioned a really key information
Hmm.
with this is because about the idea of bounce rate, right?
Yeah.
Because in this sort of like a spam world, you did sometimes in most often you don't have quality level labels, or you don't even have labels,
Exactly.
particularly for a website in this case, right?
Yeah.
Because there's really no way for a user to say they're not the ones that are reviewing the website saying, "Hey Google, guess what? I found a spam website," right?
Yeah.
So you have to sort of indirectly figure out what could be these like clickbait website based on user behavior.
Hmm.
And I do know that bounce rate is definitely one of the things to look at, right?
Yeah.
And just out of curiosity, personally for me, but also for other users out, viewers out there,
Hmm.
when you're talking about the bounce rate, how do you sort of look at, obviously you're looking at the distribution of the time that it
Hmm.
takes for users to visit the website and then exit that website.
Hmm.
So how do you sort of determine that kind of threshold in terms of, okay, how do we kind of classify this certain website as like it's a spam website?
So that's a good question. So in the case of using bounce rate, so that's why you need like many more signals apart from bounce rate in order to determine if like a website is spam or not.
Yeah,
That's one of the signals we would use, but just using bounce rate, there'll be so many false positives.
yeah,
It probably wasn't worth it for us in order to use just one signal and automatically remove websites from showing up in search results. So especially in like for a company like Google, false positives are really costly because, for example, like if you might end up like removing NBC Sports, like from search results. That's a big PR issue.
oh,
So that's the biggest challenge of my job there as well. So that's why like I slowly ventured into machine learning, where I use like combination of signals and let machine decide what the thresholds are in order to classify whether website is spam or not, and also like have like a very strict controls on precision, not as much as on recall. So because like I don't really care about recall, but whatever I am removing, I want to make sure that it's bad, because there is this like PR issue that Google might have to face.
yeah, yeah. I love talking about this stuff,
Yeah.
honestly. I was also like
Yeah.
similarly in that space as well,
Yeah.
mostly focused on preventing credit card like
Hmm.
fraud uh, type, type
Yeah.
problems. Yeah, okay. So let's kind of go back to your career.
Hmm.
So you did this really cool stuff at Google
Yeah.
for years, and then eventually pursued Ph.D. And you did a lot of this sort of causal inference experimentation.
Yeah.
Um, were there maybe like a one or two things that you learned that was just really helpful for a number of like data science interviews that you ended up going through?
Yeah. So I would say like I was slightly stronger in most of the A/B testing interviews.
Yeah,
So because like my research is in experimentation, so it helped me have a strong base. But I would say though, like so experimentation that happens in companies is very different from what we study or learn in, for example, like stats courses or econ courses.
certainly.
So like one of the best resource actually in order to like learn about this is there is a new book, I mean almost a year old, called Trustworthy Online Experimentations.
Yeah,
So this was written by Ronnie Kohavi and Yaju and Dan Tang. So like these are like really really respected people in the industry who've had so much experience conducting experiments in these top companies, and it's perfect like way to actually know how experiments are conducted in companies,
yeah,
and actually answer it in a way that like what the interviews are looking for. For example, if like if I hadn't read that book, I wouldn't really know about all these like primary metric or overall evaluation criteria or guardrail metrics. I would probably just say oh, I would care about conversion rate, and like that's what I would that would be my primary metric of the experiment. So that is good, but I think companies are looking for whether you are able to think in a very holistic manner. So yeah, I mean, designing an experiment is one thing, but when you take it in the field, there are just so many things that can go wrong.
yeah.
So I feel like if you have like a slightly good understanding of all those things, I think you are ahead of everyone else who are in these interviews.
Yeah,
So
yeah. definitely. Yeah, no, thanks for that input there.
Mhm.
So what was it like, and this is really for, fresh graduates who are currently
Mhm.
pursuing like entry level positions, like, could you kind of talk about like what was that transition from like graduating to pursuing these jobs? Like, what was that experience like?
Yeah. So I did have some experience while I was giving interviews for internships, but because of COVID, so all of those got receded. So I would say, like, I had some small expectation going into like an actual job search, but so I can't stress this enough. Like preparing for interviews is completely different from like knowing stuff.
Yeah,
So I believe, you can be really smart. You can know, you can be very good coder. You can be very good at data science, but interviews is a different ball game. So I feel you need to prepare for that. You need to understand what companies are looking for. You need to do mock interviews. You need to see where you are, not really good at, what you're not really good at, and then like put more time in that thing, in those, and then like go ahead. So like that's one thing. Like I thought, oh, like I have so much experience, like I know all this stuff, but if you go to the interview, if you're not really prepared, if you're not really structured, I think, it will be hard to crack them.
yeah, yeah, definitely. I'd like to kind of transition a little bit more about like the interview prep now. So, what are some of the resources that you use for your preparation?
So I was actually aiming for like wide variety of jobs. No, like I mean, in the field of data science, but there are like different levels. I would say, for example, like a research scientist at Facebook is a data scientist, but much more technical.
Yeah,
There is like a research data scientist. There is like a data scientist. There is like product data scientist, and there is data analyst. So there are like wide variety of jobs. So owing to my like previous experience and having research and some coding background, so I was trying to aim for the best. So I was kind of spread a little bit thin because I had to practice coding, like I had to
yeah,
practice stats, causal inference, A/B testing, like
yeah,
coding, data science coding. So, but yeah, so I used like variety of websites, and data interview was really helpful to me in case studies specifically, because going into that I didn't really know that there is like a rubric that people follow, and
yeah,
structure is very important, communication is important, like scoping the problem is important. Like I didn't really know about that. I would just jump into the answer, try to arrive at the solution, but that's just one out of like six different things that they're looking for.
yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think, I've worked with a number of candidates at this point, since I launched DataInterview like full time. And one thing I've noticed is that, candidates will often provide a response to these open-ended problems without any sort of set of structure, and thinking about like what are key points that they need to cover.
Hmm.
And so this is where, looking at courses like the Case in Point course, which is
Yeah.
offered on dataing.com, gives you, here are the key points you definitely want to cover, and how do you sort of address these follow-up questions that you have, during the business case problems.
Yeah.
So it's good that, you found that to be helpful.
Yeah. So I also really liked, so I was very surprised to see some of the answers in cases, for example, something like 3 out of 6 score. So I thought like all the cases would be like, oh, this is how you answer it. But then you also had the ones, like, hey, the problem that this candidate is doing is that he's jumping right into the answer, like he's not scoping out the problem, or he's not
Yeah.
asking clarification. So I was like, oh, like, okay, like this is, so that was really, like surprising to me that you had even the bad ones as well as the good ones. So
Yeah.
yeah, so that was interesting.
Yeah. One really vital important tip, especially for viewers out there who are preparing for interviews, is that whenever you come across, I would say 9 out of 10 of these case problems, even if it's like a strictly like a technical like statistics round, you do not want to jump into a response where you're providing a solution or your technical solution. You want to first of all approach it like a consultant, meaning you want to ask some clarifying questions
Yeah.
and also demonstrate that you understand the question.
Yeah.
And that will be in the form of a combination of questions that you're asking to the interviewer and clearly defining what that business objective is. right? And once you have set that background, then you segue over to, okay, now I'm going to start brainstorming the technical solution. And then towards the end, you tie it back to, what is the business impact from the solution that you're providing? That's what the interviewers are looking for. They're not necessarily looking for, okay, did you get the answer right or not? But they're also looking for the means of how do you derive the answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you're totally right, and a lot of like mock interviews really help me. Like I cannot tell, like all the viewers like how underrated mock interviews are. I think even like at least in the community that you have, like people have like a chance to mock interview each other. I believe like being an interviewer yourself will help you understand, what the real interviews are looking for.
Yeah.
Like, like, okay, you directly jumped into the answer, or you didn't really like, scope out narrow down your scope of the question. So like that actually helps you see, like I can now see what they're looking for. I can now see what my problem is. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a really important point that you just brought out there, and that's what helped me become effective when I was a candidate myself a couple of years ago pursuing data science roles. Is I really put myself in the mind of what is the interviewer thinking, right?
Okay.
There's a really good saying that understand to be understood, right? So communication 101.
Yeah.
And so when you really place yourself in the shoes of an interviewer, no longer you're approaching this sort of interview like, oh, this is an interviewer and I'm an interviewee. Rather, let's sort of approach it like an equals, and let's have a conversation about it, right?
Exactly.
And that was one of the tricks that I used, right? And it really helped me do well in a lot of these case interviews.
Definitely. Yeah. So one other thing I see is that, like at least me, that which I used to do is, so I think touched upon it a little bit to have it like a conversation, like think of yourself as a consultant rather than, hey, you have something to gain from the interview. So like, I think like if you think like a consultant, you try to think from business perspective rather than just trying to answer. So that helps you arrive at the answer. And also it impresses the interview really well. Oh, like this person understands the business.
That's right. That's right. I really love what you're saying, honestly. It always gives me a lot of excitement whenever, we're sort of like on the same page about things. And I really think that it's just important. A lot of candidates sort of have a tendency to think that, here's the company, the dream company that I want to work for, right?
Yeah.
And I have to try to get the answers right. No, don't think about it like that, okay?
Exactly.
Really believe in yourself, approach it like a consultant. And when you approach it like a consultant, it really means that, okay, here's a company that is facing a problem.
Yeah.
And I know how to solve that problem. I know how to provide value to this company.
Exactly.
And here's how I'm going to do it, right?
Yeah.
When you approach it like that, then you're really bringing out the expertise.
Yeah.
And the interviewer, just by default, is going to be really impressed in terms of how you're approaching this.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So I think mock interviews will help you internalize that. I believe like irrespective of how many times you read this or how many times you listen this, until you do the mock interview or, until you are the interviewer yourself, it's hard for people to internalize it and make it like, innate aspect of the way they interview. So yeah.
Yeah, that's great. No, thank you for the input on like just overall kind of interview process.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to kind of hone in on, your new exciting role that you're going to be transitioning into pretty soon. So you're going to be a data scientist at Apple. What could you talk to the viewers a little bit more about that?
Definitely. So I'll be a data scientist at Apple AI ML org. So in their experimentation team. So I'm really, really excited because it falls directly into the work what I've been doing for the past 5 years. The experimentation. So I will be helping them develop the experimentation platform internally and helping them test it on various Apple products. Like Apple Music, Apple Arcade, Apple TV, things like that. So a lot of details are still like very, it's not really out yet, like I haven't joined there. So, but I'm really excited. So a lot of these people are, some of them, like I've met them in conferences during my PhD, presented together. So I'm super excited to join them and, learn from them and be part of that team. I think like 3 years ago, if you'd have told me that I would end up in a team like that, I don't think I would have believed you, but I'm super stoked. And like I said, like preparing specifically for the interviews and, like giving a lot of mocks, giving a lot of interviews, helped me get there because there is just so much randomness in interview process, irrespective of how good you are. There is just that inherent randomness. So you just have to keep that positive attitude. You just have to, do best from your side, prepare the best way, use the best resources and give your best. I feel like eventually you will get to that, role that you dreamed of. Yeah,
Gotcha. Could you perhaps just kind of provide more kind of information about in terms of like the technical side of things, like what were your preparation strategy, any sort of tips that you could provide in terms of any, candidates who want to become a data scientist at Apple?
definitely. So I believe, like technical side. So for some of these roles, like coding is kind of mandatory. There will be one or two coding rounds. But I feel like mistake that most people do is, like they spend most of their time just in coding because there is so much and it's more difficult compared to other things. So that's the mistake they do. They spend disproportionate amount of time, just solving more and more lead code questions, understanding that. So, but I would suggest, like for data scientist interviews, so they don't go as much into, for example, like advanced concepts like binary trees or, like reverse binary tree, things like that. They would most probably stick for, arrays or advanced arrays. So I would say spend like 80-90% of your time on getting like really good at arrays and just cover some of the other topics. But yeah, so that's so I did a lot of like lead code for that. And also one thing that I would suggest is, like most of the problems in coding fall under these, like I would say like sub problems. As in, if you know how to solve this sub problem, you can solve all the problems under that.
Yeah. Great.
So yeah, so if you learn those building blocks and learn how to connect any question to those building blocks, it makes your life much easier. So arrays, for example, has like around like 9 building blocks or 9 sub problems, and every array question can be tied back to those building blocks. It makes your life much easier rather than just solving like 2 lead code questions every day and still being like, oh, I don't know if I'm still there yet. So
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. So coding is one technical domain
exactly. Okay.
you needed to study for. What other domains did you also need to study?
So A/B testing is one. So I think with respect to A/B testing, like I mentioned previously, so the book is really great resource to understand how companies actually do it and what they actually should care about. So that will help you speak their language, which is very rare in interviews, especially I mean, not many data science people right now have experience in the area of experimentation or, students actually conducted experiments. So that book gives you language to talk about experiments in a great way. So I think there should be, so you need to be very comfortable with, for example, like power analysis or, how do you even decide what the metrics, what the right metrics are, what are things that you should be worried about. So yeah, so all experiments are pretty similar, like, but once you know these basics, I feel like you can answer any experiment question.
Yeah. Yeah. And a little bit more like input on that on my end is that I often see that candidates will sort of say like the default values for significance level, power, and MD, and they will say, okay, 5% for significance level, 80% for power, and then 1% for MD.
Yeah,
When you're saying that, it's make sure you clearly understand the reasons as to why those values are there, and realize that it's not in there are going to be many experimentation where you don't really set those default values.
exactly.
So understand the intuition behind the range of each parameter, because there could be some instance where you might set your significance level at 10%, power at 90%, and MD greater than 1%. It could be in some cases 10%.
Yeah,
So understand the business reasoning behind how and why you set these values, because that's certainly a fair game when it comes to interviews on AP listening.
exactly. I mean, so one example for that could be like, a Google search page improving the page load time by like, 5 milliseconds has like practical significance of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
But for a startup, it doesn't really matter. So like the MDE is so different for, like company scale. So depending on the company you're answering for, depending on the case study, like they expect you to do this. Like if you go to a Google interview and say that my MDE is like 10%, they would probably not believe you. Because everything at that scale has already been done. You're looking at very small wins.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It's always important when you're designing experiment, never lose sight of the business problem.
Yeah.
You're serving the business, and so that's something that people should, in general, just keep in mind. So coding, A/B testing, or there, do people need to also learn about statistics, machine learning, any other topics?
Yeah, I mean, so for most data science interviews, I would say like, product data science or even like a good data science positions, like SQL is kind of a must. So I believe you cannot mess up SQL rounds. So because those are like, I would say easy ones. Even for most of my interviews, they didn't really go into like very tricky SQL questions. I think in general, companies are not trying to trick you. They're trying to assess how, like how good you are. So they want to reduce that variance around your, how good you will be in the job. So they're not really trying to trick you into something. But SQL is something I feel that there can be no mistakes at. And it's the easiest way to learn and easiest way to answer. Like if you get some SQL questions wrong, like I believe, like you cannot, move forward in the interview rounds.
Yeah. Yeah, got it. All right, great. No, thank you so much for, providing this coverage on, what are some like technical prep you need to do for a data science role. If you had to just provide like one concrete advice for, candidates out there preparing for data science interviews, like, what would be that tip?
So I think we kind of like briefly covered on a lot of things. So I think like if I have to say like one tip again, we touched upon this as in like understand what they are looking for, so that will help you like prepare better. So I believe that's the same thing for like a resume or a cover letter or like the way you answer. So I think it's very important for you to keep in the shoes of like the hiring team or the recruiter or the company, and to clearly look for what is it that they're looking for, why are they conducting this interview, what are they trying to get at. So that will help you reverse engineer the way you prepare or the way you answer. I believe like people generally just get carried away into just trying to hey, if I do this well, they'll give me a job, or like trying to be like, oh, they're doing you a favor by like interviewing you and giving you a job. So I believe like you should treat yourself like an equal, believing that you're part of the market, you're part of the job market, and they're trying to get your services. So I feel that that change of mindset is like very much needed for a lot of people, and it makes their life much easier if they change their mindset. Actually, they'll be more responsible. They will spend their efforts in the right manner, and they will actually crack better interviews. So,
Definitely. Yeah, thanks for that input. So as we sort of achieve closure of this conversation. So how can people follow up with you? Are there blogs or sort of things that you like to share on your end?
Yeah, for sure. So the best way to reach me is in LinkedIn or Twitter DMs. I reply all the time. So I will also like link to the website. You can link to the website in the description. So I try to help people as much as I can. Because like I was helped by a lot of people to get to where I am from, like from the south side of India to, like getting into Google, to getting to a PhD program, now to Apple. So I want to really, really give back. So please see my website, try to reach out to me, and I'll try to help as much as I can.
Gotcha. Well, thank you for, obviously helping out like the data community, right? I mean, that's also what excites me, right? The fact that, I really get to provide like insights, that's such like a mystery box for in terms of like, how do you get into these FANG companies and data scientists? So, for the viewers out there, I'll drop down links to his LinkedIn profile along with his personal website. So definitely check out his his content out there. Okay, yeah. So definitely thank you so much for partaking in this data talk as a guest.
And yeah, thanks so much, Dan. Like data interview, like really helped me to understand the nuances in case studies. I think without which it would have been much harder for me to crack some of the interviews. So I really like what you're doing, the community, the website, the way it is structured. So thanks so much for that.
Awesome. I really appreciate it. And just real quick for the viewers out there, definitely check out DataInterview.com if you're looking for, resume review, coaching and courses. You could also email me directly, dan@datainterview.com if you have any questions. And stay tuned for my next YouTube video.